2026 board meeting to order. I'll ask that each commissioner please respond with a here when I call out their name. Commissioner Doan.
Here.
Commissioner Duggan.
Here.
Commissioner Lysak.
Here.
Commissioner Sanders.
Here.
Next, we'll have reports by the CEO and management staff.
Well, good evening, President Fisher and commissioners. I have a pretty full agenda tonight, so I'll get right after the CEO announcements. First, bring to your attention that once again, TVWD received the GFOA Budget Award. It says here that this is the 23rd consecutive award, but actually it's 24 years of biennial budgets, so it's our 12th actual award. And this is reviewed by anonymous national experts that take our budget and they evaluate it as a policy document, financial plan, operations guide, as well as a communications tool. But probably the most important thing that we get from this award, as well as the award we get for the ACFR that we routinely apply for, is the feedback that we get from these national experts. And we get the feedback and we incorporate that into the budget process as we go forward. So it's great feedback to continuously improve our budget process as well as our financial reporting process. Speaking of financial reporting, we do have an update to the audit. You might remember that at the December meeting, we presented the district's annual comprehensive financial report, the final version of that. We also had draft financial statements in there that needed to be updated based on some late information that we got from FEMA. So those were reposted, put it online, submitted to the Oregon Secretary of State as required back in December. Now we have an option. We can print out a hard copy for you, or you can look at the version that's online if you are interested in looking at the district's ACFR. So is there anybody that wants a hard copy? Because Justin can make sure when he gets printed and delivered to you if you would like a hard copy. And Commissioner Sanders, if somebody could, he's online, I can't see him. So I can check with you.
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, just wanted to make sure we offered. I want to give you an update. So you might remember that as part of our budget process, we talked about having Dr. Teodoro come back and do a presentation in the region. 3 presentations that we have planned for him, all within a day or so. The first would be on the future of the Safe Drinking Water Act, and that would be oriented more towards our regional partners and staff here at the district. We're actually talking about doing 2 presentations simply because in the past we filled this room basically with our regional partners. We want to make sure that our staff have a chance to learn more about the future of the Safe Drinking Water Act. So we're interested in that. Of course, it will be Manny's interesting observations and analysis that he does on this. And as you know, he pretty much quantifies everything through research. So it'll be interesting. The second presentation, or the second event, will be building trust within the community. He's done some interesting research. It started with the profits of distrust, where he was looking at the bottled water industry, but it's gone beyond that. As a political scientist, he's looked at how trust is built within the community. With everything going on right now in our community with issues around immigration and so forth, we thought it would be interesting for to hear from him on how we can continue to build trust within the community. So he'll talk in the evening about that. With the goal is to have our elected officials there as well as our regional partners. So the tentative date is May the 19th, and I want to run that past y'all to see if that is something that will work, because obviously we want our elected officials to be able to attend. Yes, Commissioner Fisher? Oh, it is. Let me rework this date. Yeah, let me rework the date and we'll come back with another date then. Thank you for that. That's why we're having this conversation. Make sure that we didn't end up with.
Point out that May 19th is my 80th.
Oh. Well, congratulations. All right. So we will come back with a better date. I also want to give you an update here. I think I've talked to the commissioners individually about this, but we have been working on developing protocol for responding to federal inquiries that we may get from federal agencies. We want to make sure that our staff are prepared should federal agencies show up and demand information. So we've been working on the procedures for our staff to follow. They have procedures, but we want to have this be a little bit sharper to deal with those particular inquiries. We'll be training the field staff as well as the office staff to know what to do. It's possible that our field staff encounter these agencies while they're out in the field conducting their business, as well as maybe agents coming into our lobby. We want to make sure everybody's prepared for that. In addition, we have a desire to affirm with our community that the information that we collect on them is private, that we don't share it. And in fact, we don't collect information that might be harmful to them. So at the February work session, I'd like to spend a little bit of time with you to talk about that and to see if you would be interested in affirming that through some formal resolution on February the 18th. So I don't need necessarily talk about it tonight because I want to talk to you at the work session about this to see if that's something that would be that you would judge to be in our customers' interest. The last item is my schedule. I'll be out tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday. While I'm out, Andrew Carlstrom, our customer service director, has kindly agreed to handle my duties for the day. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel Carrier. Is it you, Pete, to give the director's report?
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, President Fisher and commissioners and Commissioner Sanders online. So I get to hand this off to Joel and also get partial credit from a different department tonight, even though Engineering and Ops has the calendar here for tonight's report. You may recall that we've moved Joel's team, the Water Resources Group, from Engineering and Ops and moved it into the Water Supply Department as we transition towards the operation of the Willamette and all the things that team is going to need to do. But we're still working very closely together, and Joel's going to talk about some ways that we're doing that and leveraging technology. So I'm just going to hand it right to Joel, and he can take it from there.
Thank you, Pete. Good evening, President Fisher, commissioners. So tonight's topic is, as Pete explained, it's a joint effort between both of our departments here. The title of it, self-explanatory, water quality and GIS data management, but we're going to dive into a few details about some of the projects we're working on in order to help us basically effectively come to bring some of our projects to fruition that we've been talking about for a while, and to help support the water supply integration project. So just a summary here of what we talk about when we're talking about the operational data that we have in terms of the TVWD's portfolio. This isn't exclusive to all the data of the district, but just kind of look at the operational buckets here, if you will. So water quality data, the first one there, that's a lot of stuff that my team collects. We have boatloads of data out there that we've collected over the years. And that's only escalating right now with some of the new projects we're starting up. The WQMP is an acronym for Water Quality Monitoring Plan. That's the baseline effort we're doing to support the WSI project. So establishing even more robust information for our system before we get to the WSI project. And then some future stuff up there, you'll see the watershed work that we've been developing under the WIF Commission too. So thinking about how that might work in the future and setting the stage to support that. So in that lane, again, is a growing amount of data that we want to make sure that we were looking at in terms of how do we utilize that, how do we share that. And then we have our GIS data. So I think we've probably seen various presentations about this. That really forms the base layer for so much of the work that the district does. It's our asset management system. That's the team that manages that effort. It's all of our assets. It's our reservoirs, our pump stations, our sample stations, our pipes. You know, so much of our data gets associated with those things. So if you kind of think about it, it's a huge pillar of how we actually display and utilize data. And then we've got our SCADA data. So that data is obviously all of our operational data. It's the data that we look at in terms of flow, daily totals coming through our system, pressure, we monitor that, our operations team after hours. I mean, it's a critical component of how we make sure we maintain and manage the system and keep it operational 24/7. That's kind of our three big buckets of data that we talk about when we look at this. So if you kind of go down there, we've known this for a while. The challenge that we have is that staff must ask or tell folks about data for decision making. That's not inherently a bad thing. It's just how it operates within a utility, right? Like our team collects a bunch of data in the field. Our operations team, who may be monitoring the system and pressure and flow, will come to us and they say, "Hey, what'd that look like today out in the field for the water quality?" And that's great. Like we like the fact there's collaboration, but at the same time, it still requires people to come and ask or somebody to come tell somebody about it. So what we've been trying to work on for a while is this better solution where we still want to work as a team. That's still a principle that we want to make sure we do at the district. But our data should be better connected and more easily accessible for this decision making. The goal being somebody should be able to go find this information, this data in a more consolidated format, and then come back to the team and we can make these more effective decisions in a faster, more effective way. So we're going to talk about each one of these buckets here in a minute, and then we're going to talk about kind of the efforts we've been pulling together to bring us into the future of what we're doing. So water quality software, the first one we've been doing, this project's actually been in the works for a little bit here. So it goes back quite a ways in terms of the why. So we've always known we've got all this great data, but we really wanted a better way to capture, manage, and report data. So we use a lot of Excel spreadsheets, which are great, but they have their limits. So really this, again, going back several years, identifying the need that we needed to think about how we could leverage this information better. So in our timeline here, we launched a collaborative RFP process in 2024, and we began live testing just late this last year. So we are under beta testing for this platform. The platform is called Locus Technologies. This is actually a screenshot we just pulled recently from the work we're doing. It's GIS based as well, so it actually integrates with our GIS layers, which is great. It's a web-based solution. This particular vendor, they have an extensive background in environmental data management. So their portfolio isn't just water-based agencies. It's a whole lot of host of other things like Los Alamos National Laboratory, EPA, the utility industry, like oil and gas. So they're really into like understanding data management, which is we're really finding that they really understand data, which is awesome.
Hey, Joel,
Yep.
Commissioner Sanders has his hand up online.
Oh. Yes, Commissioner Fisher or Commissioner Sanders, go ahead.
You're still muted, Commissioner Sanders.
Thank you. This collaborative RFP, is this done with Hillsborough, Beaverton, JWC? Who are their collaborative partners on this RFP process?
Good question, Commissioner Sanders. Yes, so when we launched it, we actually had Hillsborough staff as part of our selection committee, partly because they had already been leveraging this software as well. And in fact, it was Locus at the time. So it was Hillsborough staff as part of that effort. It's still under TVWD in terms of like the contract, but we just wanted more partnership eyes on it because this would potentially be a future application for the WWSS and WIF.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep asking one more question
Yeah.
because you segued perfectly. How does, and I guess the origins of this was last Friday, we were signing a contract with North Plains with JWC, and one of the requirements was that North Plains gave all of their SCADA data back to the JWC. Do we share this data with Hillsborough? Does Hillsborough share their data with us? You know, we've got this discrete line between our two systems, but clearly, you know, we share a common pipe and a common source. So do they merge at some point in time?
At the current point in time, they don't. I don't know. It's something we haven't necessarily explored yet in terms of that future. Certainly something we take into consideration, but the current point in time, they are separate, isolated systems just by nature of the fact of how we would manage and input the data in terms of our team, output data in terms of what we want out. So, but certainly something we should be considering for the future, I think.
And
Thank you.
Joel, if I
You're
could,
welcome.
and Commissioner Sanders, this is Pete in the room. So to answer the SCADA aspect of your question, we currently do have some visibility into parts of the JWC system. on our SCADA. So we can see those from their historian. It's not a direct link between the operational portions of those different SCADA installations and vice versa. The JWC folks can see some of the SCADA parameters from TVWD's entry points, so they can look at flows, things like that.
Right on. Thank you.
That's actually a perfect segue into the next one. So, so talking about the GIS and SCADA stuff a little bit more here. So as we already mentioned, our assets are utilized a lot by our staff for operational things, planning, using tools like CityWorks. GIS forms the basis for that. Our asset management software, mapping requests for special projects, even our fleet GPS. While we make sure we track assets, including those vehicles around the district, so we could deploy somebody effectively if something comes up. And as Pete mentioned, the SCADA stuff. I'm going to use the laser pointing here for 1 sec. So you can actually see in this screenshot, this is our dashboard solution development. This is the beta, we call it beta version 2.0. So this is pulling in both our GIS and our SCADA data that we mentioned here. There's a whole host of things we can pull from. There's hundreds, if not 1,000, over 1,000 tags in our system. Those little tags are the data points that we say, hey, we want this piece of data from the analyzer. We want this piece of data from this flow at this particular site. So we're pulling all this into this initial dashboard for a proof of concept, if you will. So how do we basically leverage all this information, visually see it, make decisions on it? People can see it. This goes back to finding that solution where we're still going to work as a team, but again, a tool that's in front of us immediately to look at things and go, hey, I can see what's happening right now with all these different layers of information coming into us. So as Pete just pointed out, this was a great segue because JWC treatment plant, you can actually see right there in that dashboard. That's the SCADA data that Pete was mentioning that we're pulling in. So it's coming from a historian. There's firewalls and safeties in place in terms of like making sure the SCADA system itself is protected, but we can see that information in near real time. So setting the stage for, again, why we're doing this right now to try and make sure we really think about the future and why this is a joint department report. We want the ability to see all this relevant water quality GIS and SCADA system data or SCADA data during the water supply integration project. We want to make sure we have a dashboard that proof of concept, again, is something that we're going to be doing more of, developing a more robust tool once we could bring the water quality data out of that platform through a nightly process. We're working on that right now so that this dashboard will become, version 3.0 and beyond. We want the system to be something that isn't just for WSI. This is for our long-term efforts to really make sure how we operate as a utility to achieve stability after WSI, support data-driven decision-making long-term, again, leveraging all these different streams of information, and frankly, just leading through innovation as the managing agency. I think a lot of us attend conferences. I don't think I would use the term a unicorn in this, but I definitely think it's leading the way. This is something that not a lot of utilities necessarily do in terms of bringing these assets together to this type of tool. So what are the next steps for us going forward? We're going to fully implement our water quality software. I just got good news from the project team today. Everything's working really good with the platform. We've been working through, as any software application, a few things here and there. The vendor has been amazing to work with, so we are effectively moving forward and should be stabilized within the next month. And then we're going to develop that improved dashboard utilizing all these data streams. So we'll call it again version 3.0 and beyond. And then we're going to roll that out before the water supply integration project, so we can start really thinking about our system, how we use that tool just day to day, so we have some built-in process before we even get to the WSI project. So I've already said it before, but our end goal, just leveraging this data for effective, time-sensitive decision-making during the water supply integration and beyond. So that's our department report tonight. Happy to share this information with you, and if you have any other questions, happy to answer them.
So President Fisher, that concludes the reports of the Chief Executive Officer.
Oh, we've got a hand online from Commissioner Sanders.
Oh, I'm sorry. That did not conclude.
I'm sorry. I will stop interrupting after this question or statement. I think it's fantastic that this integration plan for the software will be ready before we start pushing water through, because I have a feeling there's a plethora of water quality engineers who would be really excited to watch the sorry, I got a cold. Time dependent stabilization of the system as the new water comes through. That's probably going to excite a lot of people, not just locally, but nationally as well.
Yes, just to respond to that, Commissioner Sanders, yes, because what we'll be able to do is all this data that goes in, we'll actually be able to, just like you pointed out, put a time series data visualization together, if you will, of this, because the data can be 24, every time we go out and collect samples in the field, it gets uploaded, we'll see that snapshot and we can build that series of what it looks like. So you're absolutely right. Heat maps, stuff we've done before, that you've seen from some of our staff in last presentations, exactly the type of tools we want to be able to showcase after this. So thank you for the comment.
That's exciting.
That concludes the report of the Chief Executive Officer and Management Staff.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Commissioner Communications. The commissioners will now report on recent meetings attended. We'll start with Commissioner Doan.
Well, let's see, the new year came and let's see, we have tonight's meeting. We have the JWC and Barney Joint Operating Commission meeting last Friday. And then the work session earlier this
Commissioner Duggan.
On the 5th of January, met with Paul Matthews and received updates, especially about our CIS infrastructure. On the 12th, I attended the Washington County Public Affairs Forum. County Governmental Relations Specialist Aaron Doyle gave a presentation focusing on county's concerns going into the 2026 legislative session, short session that starts next month. In a similar vein, on the 13th, I attended the Washington County CPO #1 meeting where Representative Watanabe also came and presented what her focus will be the short session. On the 14th, I attended the Regional Water Providers Consortium Executive Committee meeting where we received updates, had an introduction of the new consortium director, Bonnie Cushman, and then also got an update on the budget and potential dues for the coming fiscal year. Looks like the coming fiscal year, the budget will go up a small percentage, and the dues, due to a large carryover, will actually go down a small percentage. So not much to worry about. The consortium, at least from a money standpoint, going to the next fiscal year. Last night I attended the Washington County CCI meeting. That's the Committee for Citizen Involvement, where they talked about the CPO modernization program, and also which really means now a shift in how county staff will be running a new outreach program and moving some of the functions of the CPO over to the Planning Commission, and then also having another a program that's going to be developed by county staff that will be rolling out this fall. And then tonight's meeting.
Commissioner Lyden.
I attended the quarterly BRJOC and JWC meetings and executive session last Friday and tonight's meeting.
Commissioner Sanders.
Yeah, I will parrot Commissioners Lysick and Doan, and then add one-on-one with Paul. The only comment I'll make about the JWC and the Barney Reservoir was that the water level's back up in the reservoir, which is wonderful because the last time we had a meeting, it was at an all-time low. So it's good to see the water levels back in the reservoirs in the Coast Range.
For me, on the 18th of December, I attended a town hall of Washington County Commissioner Nafisa Faye to hear updates about what's going on with local Washington County government. On the 8th of the new year, I attended a Zoom of Majority Leader Ben Bowman and Speaker Julia Fahey to hear what their thoughts about the upcoming short session would be. On the 12th, I attended a meetup with Mayor Hoove Tigard. On the 16th, I attended a meeting with the CEO and Commissioner Doan. On the 17th, I attended Representative Sue Reike Smith's town hall to hear her perspectives and what she wanted to discuss during the short session. On the 20th, I had my check-in with the CEO. On the 8th, we also had our agenda planning meeting. And then on the 21st tonight, we have our regular board meeting. Do we have any topics to be raised by commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move to public comment. Sam, do we have anybody online for public comment?
Not seeing any this evening.
Okay. So we will move on to our consent agenda. The consent agenda items are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any board members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Any items requested to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion will be considered immediately after the board has approved those items which do not require discussion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I have a motion for the consent agenda to be approved. Do I have a second?
This is Commissioner Lysick. I second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. We'll now move on to our business agenda, starting with our federal and state lobbyist update.
So good evening, President Fisher and Commissioners. So tonight we have two related items on the business agenda. One is get an update from our state and federal team. The other is actually to have the board readopt the district's legislative strategies. Tonight I'll just provide a brief introduction and then I'll turn it over to our state team. We have Waylon here who will be presenting on the state, and then online we have Joel and some of his team members that will get to that. So overriding objectives for our legislative efforts, first is to normalize our government affairs activities. We're going through a period of time where there may not be a lot of money available from either the state or federal government because of other activities outside of our control, but we want to maintain our visibility on policy issues as well as to be available to those bodies should things turn in the future. So we can be ready to take advantage. Having said that, we will be pursuing funding as available. We also want to increase the coordination of the district's federal and state team, as well as our industry associations, so that we have a coordinated effort to achieve the ends for our customers, which is the bottom line, is to produce those outcomes for our customers. I'm not going to introduce the CFM team members. I'll actually let them introduce themselves since they're here. So with that, I'll turn over to Waylon, who can discuss the state team. Waylon, you want to take over?
Perfect. The forward button or we'll do like that. Great. Can you hear me okay? And I'm being picked up okay over there? Excellent. Thank you all for having me, commissioners and staff who I recognize most of your faces and had a great pleasure to work with you over the years. Just for the record again, I'm Waylon Buchan. I'm one of your state team lobbyists. And I have the distinct honor, frankly, of representing TVWD in the Capitol. This is our full state team. Some of you have probably interacted with, in addition to myself, with Ryan Gleason or with Dale Penn up there. We are the 3 out of our 5-person state team that is assigned to you basically full-time with myself as point. If anything ever gets really DEFCON, which is the highest, 1 or 4? 1. If it's really DEFCON 1, we would probably tap all of us and run around and advocate on your behalf. But the typical trio is myself, Ryan, and Dale. So let's briefly talk about what we're going to talk about. I'll give you a quick lay of the land of sort of what we're coming into in terms of a short session versus a long session. We'll talk a little bit about transportation, not necessarily because we all care so much about transportation more than we care about water pipes, but it is infrastructure adjacent, and it is taking up a lot of the airspace in Salem. So it's sort of worth talking about. You're seeing it in the headlines. It's definitely worth diving into. We're also going to talk about the budget challenge, which Paul just alluded to. The budget landscape is grim, but we have more to unpack and more to talk about there. We have other session themes that are kind of coming upon us, whether we like them or not. And so we'll find that those will also take up some sort of airspace during session. We'll briefly touch on your TVWD priorities, which should not come as a major surprise. In fact, they should be exactly what you have in your packet for what you'll vote on later, whether you adopt it. And then we'll briefly I'll kind of close with a little visual graphic of the session timeline, just so we all sort of know what we're headed into. And I don't have like a big script in front of me, so I won't be offended if you interrupt me, ask questions, anything that's on your mind, I'm here for you. So this is the lay of the land. We are still dealing with twin Democratic supermajorities. It's worth saying because on paper they do have supermajorities, but that has been tested over the last couple of sessions, especially last session where it showed that even with double supermajorities, one of your members being late from a flight, getting off the airplane, might mean that you don't pass a transportation package in the session or the special session. So it's a very razor thin supermajority. And we're finding that the minority party has a tendency to punch above its weight class and drive more of the activities in that building than we maybe give them credit for. But that's technically the dynamic. We only have 35 days to get business done. And you contrast that with a long session, an odd numbered year session like 2025, it's 160 constitutional days. So we're there for 5-6 months. This is like a 5-week sprint by comparison. So we'll tee off February 2nd, and before we know it, we'll be done. The timelines are extremely compressed, where bills might die in the process a month and a half in. They die in the first week in a short session. So everything's pretty much pre-greased, or it doesn't move. There are a few key committee appointments that are sort of just worth quickly mentioning. The water landscape in the form of Representative Ken Helm, Representative Mark Owens, a really good bipartisan duo. That's going to be changing. We see Ken Helm is going to not run for re-election. They're going to replace him on that committee with Representative Sarah Finger McDonald, who doesn't have the same water background, but she is a 20-year PhD horticulturalist. So we'll see how they navigate that committee. But they had something in the form of being co-chairs that really let them drive water policy in the building. We're not sure if that's going to have an impact on what they can actually get done. They don't have the same kumbaya Republican-Democrat agreement on bills that they used to be able to point to. So transportation. We know that in the 2025 session, we pretty much took the entire 5-6 months to argue over transportation. They unveiled the package very late. It's failed in pretty spectacular fashion. The governor called everyone back to a special session. They did successfully pass that House Bill 3991. Again, someone was late on a plane, so they had some last minute compromises. The bill wasn't exactly how everyone envisioned. But nonetheless, Republicans and the GOP grassroots contingent that opposed this legislation went ahead and started signature gathering to put it on a referendum. If you've been watching the headlines, they were successful. They gathered just about double the amount of signatures that were necessary to put this on the ballot. Secretary of State certified those. Per Oregon's Constitution, when that happens, all the revenue streams from that bill were paused. So all of that work and all that effort to pass a transportation package, come back in a special session just to basically have it all put on ice, sent to the November election, and then put on the ballot for the people to decide whether they want those taxes to stay in place. Democrats, in particular, Governor Kotek, probably didn't like the idea of sort of wearing that dead transportation package around her neck as she ran for re-election in November of 26. In fact, we know that's the case because she actually called for the legislature to repeal the entire thing. That was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that was, I think, when we hit save on this and said, what's next? Well, I can tell you what comes next because it already happened. After that announcement that we're just going to repeal the entire thing, Senator Bruce Starr, Republicans, and Legislative Council all did some research and said, you, in fact, can't do that. Once it's put on the ballot, this thing has to ride. It has to go to the people. That's what the Constitution says. All the other parts of the package that you'd like to repeal, you can repeal. But this stuff, the voters are going to vote on it. And they're still playing checkers and chess on this because at 5:21, as I was parking, I pulled up a press release that said from President Rob Wagner and Speaker Fahey that they're now going to have that election that has to happen They have one last chip to play and they played it. They're going to call it in May. So they're not going to let it go in November. That transportation referendum will take place now in May after they successfully pass a bill in this short session, because that's the last little authority they have to mess with this process, is to change the date of the election. Now, I don't have a lot of polling in my pocket to tell you how big of a difference that makes, right? We had a midterm, we had all kinds of presidential politics colliding in 26. I don't know what turnout looks like in May. Commissioner Fisher, you're a political scientist. You could probably guess all kinds of outcomes about having this turn from November to May, but that's where we stand as of like 5/20. This is going to go to the ballot and it's going to go during the primary election functionally. Okay. Transportation is a lot of fun, and I apologize. That's my background. If you start me on culverts, I won't stop. But moving on, the budget challenge is very real. We have been spoiled in legislative, land in Salem. After ARPA money, after all of the kind of infrastructure funds that were just rolling around, everyone is sort of ARPA drunk. And now we are coming into different times. After HR 1, you'll have heard it called the Big Beautiful Bill. That essentially punched at the time of writing, about an $800 million budget hole in Oregon's what was a passed budget. Now it's down to about 600 million in terms of a budget hole. We did have a forecast since then that said we were up a little bit. The next and only forecast we'll get is during session, and I have it on a date. I think it's the 3rd or the 4th. So we'll get one more bite at the apple, but it's going to still probably reveal that we're down funds. And we have to do basically one of 3 things if we want to balance the ledger. And we have to balance the ledger. It's one of the only things the legislature constitutionally has to do is pass a balanced budget. So they can either cut services, which they've started to sort of do. That's what this 1% allotment cuts is. They've started a state agency budgeting exercise whereby they said, everybody submit your 5% cuts. Like, put on your paper how you're going to operate next biennia, 5% down in resources, knowing that really they could probably get by with a 2.5% cuts budget. So that's sort of one way to balance the ledger. The other would be to raise taxes, raise revenue. And that would be extremely challenging in an election year. And when affordability is really bad and tariffs are kind of hammering everyone, that seems maybe like the least attractive option if you're a legislator right now. Or you could, and we could talk about this a little bit more, federally disconnect from those HR 1 changes that caused this big budget hole. And it itself is a pretty controversial kind of political football to throw around. So the last thing I'll say really quickly is that the capital construction process has sort of changed. It used to be that any old lobbyist like me could just submit a piece of paperwork and said, will you give Tualatin Valley Water District $3 million for 189th pump station? And they say, yeah, we'll consider it. And like you'd get in the queue, right? Any old lobbyist. Now you have to have that attached to a legislator, and they only get 2 this session. So it's really quite dramatically narrowed the universe of people showing up and making budget requests on behalf of a client. Now it really has to, originate from a lawmaker. And it counts even if they have a pet project or a bill, and that's going to have a fiscal impact of $100,000. That's their budget ask. That's one of their 2 budget asks. So a little bit harder to find someone to even open their door and say, yes, I'll ask for money for you this year. And the budget circumstances are such that they'd be hesitant to do that anyway, knowing they weren't going to be that successful. So I won't belabor the point too much more on budget, but it's certainly not like it was a few years ago. And if there are budget openings that happen, they'll be heavily oversubscribed, very highly competitive, and you really got to make your case for it. Federal tax disconnect. I won't go way down into a wonky finance lesson on this, but what we're talking about then is essentially taxes on overtime and tips. And that's what a lot of with the HR 1 disconnect did. It, essentially adjusted Oregon's code to not account for those taxes on overtime and tips. So it's kind of a populist argument. Now you're the bad jerk Democrat supermajority if you go ahead and re-tax people's overtime, tips, and wages, again, amidst affordability concerns. So it's a little bit of, I dare you to disconnect from the federal government, and Republicans have threatened to walk out on this issue. So, because again, it's threatening the big, beautiful bill. It's a hill they'll die on. We are also seeing a lot of legislation teed up as federal immigration response or enforcement response. So ICE in the communities is causing all kinds of consternation for lawmakers. It's not I don't have the full exhaustive list in front of me, but they are bringing legislative concepts next year that would do, things like alert notifications if ICE shows up at a school. mask requirements where you're not allowed to wear masks. You have to have an identification label. You have to have, I think there's a body cam bill, but don't quote me on that. I haven't seen any language. There's a bill that would hold federal officers liable for destruction if they come and break down your front door, or at least liable for the front door. It's those sorts of things that we're seeing. And some lawmakers are so passionate about this, they each get one bill. We're seeing some lawmakers are introducing the same bill across multiple offices, and we're like, you guys should coordinate, all right? Because you're going to have a lot of ICE can't wear masks bills if you're not careful. So I sort of remember that this feels like a little bit of a reactionary political wave that we experienced kind of around the COVID time. We always have a theme of our sessions, whether that's racial justice or law enforcement, wildfires, you name it. This one, I think ICE is going to have a pretty big theme during the session. And then we have economic development is sort of a major buzzword this year. Democrats want to be the party that's driving the economy and making revenue fall into the coffers. And so they're really trying to run with that. And then housing is still not fixed and solved in Oregon. And so that we're going to continue to see more housing legislation. If any money comes out of the budget, housing has a high priority for where that money is going to go. But again, there really isn't any. This should look a lot like the document that you'll discuss a little bit later. I stopped including the actual screenshot of the document because you just can't read it on a PowerPoint. So this is just the same thing in a table. And what it says is that we have about 5 priorities. The first 3 are sort of tied for first and that they're very important to us. Protecting the Willamette River as a drinking water source. That's broad in the sense that even a point of diversion or water transfer bill, environmental regulations, those kind of things could impact you and could impact your ability to use that as a drinking source. So that's top of the list. And when bills like 1153 from last year came out that said water transfers are secondary to invasive species concerns or tribal concerns or all these other very good concerns, we said, wait, have you thought about our gigantic water district and all the people it serves? So we successfully put that bill to bed last year. We do expect some versions of it to come again in the future. And so we're going to be in a defensive crouch on number 1 for years to come, I would say. Water quality, always top of mind. Again, it should be top of the list. This is an interesting line item because it's almost like the legislature sort of looks to entities like TVWD as a thought leader on this. You'll see a legislator introduce a bill about algal blooms or some sort of PFAS legislation. And then they find out what you do and they would like you to tell them how to write the bill. They often see the list of water treatment applications you do to drinking water and they realize we're out of our league. We should probably just ask them, and maybe they'll show up to an informational and testify on this stuff. So this is one where I like to think of you guys as a bit of a thought leader, and we try to push you into this space so people like to pick up the phone and ask you what you think about water quality. State funding for water infrastructure projects, always on the list, always important. We're also very honest with you and eyes wide open if we say it's just not going to happen next year because the budget's really poor. That's what I feel like right now. But again, we're always nimble. In 2024, we managed to get you money in a short session that we didn't think it was possible. So we're going to try. Economic development, land use, housing, water's part and parcel of that. So we're always going to try to find ways to support stuff that helps in this category and helps new development and new customers, and water connects to that. It's all sort of part of one package. And then last but not least, project delivery and contracting. We do see procurement stuff. We do see prevailing wage stuff, materials, bespoke contracting, all kinds of funny stuff impacts you in ways that we have to think sometimes an extra minute about. But that's one that we try to catch a pretty broad net. And if it's about contracting or building stuff, we do try to bring it back to your attention and make sure it's up on our radar. So last slide, and I'll get out of your way and you can hear about federal stuff. This is our timeline and what we're about to run into. It feels like I'm already in session now because bills are about to drop on us, and that's when things get really interesting. Instead of about 3,000 or 4,000 bills that we would normally experience in a long session, we're going to have like 300 or 400 bills in a short session. So it's like 10% of the order of magnitude. It's a little bit easier to manage. We expect those bills. We were told originally the 28th or the 30th of this month. We're having discussions with leadership and legislative IT, and I won't bore you with the details, but we're trying to pressure them to release them earlier. We think it's good for the public. It's good governance. If the whole public can see these bills earlier, lobbyists like us don't spend the first 5 days of the session slowing it down because we haven't read everything yet and we don't know what's in it. So I think it behooves them to just release it earlier. We're hearing that they might do that on the 23rd. at which case our team basically drops everything we're doing and we read and digest and consume that full bill stack. We triage it according to our bill tracking process, which the TVW team is one of the better clients I have at bill tracking. You actually use the portal, you actually go in there and tell me if I'm wrong, you adjust a priority 2 to a priority 3. It's actually a really good, robust process where by the end of, a few days after bills drop, I have a pretty good idea of the universe of bills and how it actually impacts you. And that's because of the back and forth that kind of takes place on that first piece of the timeline. February 2nd, we officially kick off. Incidentally, it's Water Day at the Capitol, February 2nd. We'll have some presence there, and we'll be giving some kind of lightning discussions and interactive stuff. We'll have a table or a booth, and we'll be there. Probably not the best day ever to host Water Day, but that was completely out of all of our control. We won't go there, but look forward to that. Revenue forecast is on the 4th. Like I said, it's our last big window into what the heck we're doing on the state level and how much money we have or don't have. Fingers crossed that that's a really good rosy revenue forecast and we're up hundreds of millions of dollars. That'd be a good thing. And then pretty quickly, about halfway into session, first chamber deadline happens, which means a bunch of bills die if they haven't moved to the next chamber or they're not poised to do that. 26th, basically the rest of them die if they haven't moved on. By March 8th, that's our constitutional sine die. That's when session ends, whether we're ready or not. And then you can see, I just put it on here so sort of illustrate how quickly things move. We're already off to filing day and kind of looking into November by the 10th, right? We're already putting that session behind us and people are filing and getting ready to run for office. So that's sort of the nutshell summary of where we're at. If you have any questions, I'm here, right here. Oh, let's go to thank you. Thank you. And if you have any questions on anything I said, please feel free to speak now, or if you remember or think of it later, feel free to contact Paul and I am at your disposal. You put up the back signal and I come running. So.
Questions?
To listen for the speaker. Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Joel, you're up whenever you're ready. Come off mute.
Awesome. Can you all hear me okay? I see a nod. Thank you, Tom. Thank you all so much. So last year we were there in person. Unfortunately, we're doing this virtual. I wish I was out in your neck of the woods for this presentation, but calling in from Washington, D.C. I'm actually, it sounds like you can't see me, but I am wearing a suit. So for all intents and purposes, I dressed up for this. And I'm with my colleague, Tara Croft, is going to help me through this presentation and talk a little bit about what we've been doing at the federal level for TVWD, give you a good landscape of what we are seeing and hearing in the nation's capital, and certainly please interrupt if you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation. We're happy to answer those. We're basically going to go a millimeter or so deep into things. Washington, D.C. right now is a very dynamic place. So we're happy to dive a little deeper into any topics that you all are interested in. So next slide, please. So the purpose, what we do at the end of the year, the beginning of every year, is try to go over what you all have been working on in Washington, D.C. at the federal level for the previous year. But I thought it would make sense to talk a little bit about our team again and the services we provide to TVWD, talk about some of the previous successes that we've had working together, and then talk about the policy items that are ongoing in Washington, D.C. when it comes to water issues, and your draft federal agenda, which is, I would reiterate, a draft at this point in time, and we'll be finalizing that by the end of the month before Paul makes his trip out to Washington, D.C., and then look a little bit towards the midterm elections to give you all a sense of what everybody in Washington, D.C. is thinking about and talking about when it comes to the balance of power in the House, in the Senate, and what the midterm elections mean for the Congress moving forward. So next slide, please. So just as a refresher, your federal team here works on a number of different items for the district. The number one item that you all have tasked us with is bringing back federal resources, federal funding to your system, to your community, to your water users in the form of grants and appropriations. Grants are programmatic funds that we help you all write grant applications for, submit to the federal agencies, and ultimately lobby your congressional delegation to secure those funds. A lot of work goes into that, and we've been proud to secure millions of dollars for TVWD over the last couple of years. Appropriations is another angle to get federal resources, and that's in the form of congressionally directed spending, formerly called earmarks, where your members of Congress submit your projects, and ultimately the Appropriations Committee approves and includes in appropriations bills. Tara, in particular, is going to be talking about a lot of the legislative initiatives that you are pushing at the federal level that are important to the district, and making sure that Congress understands your needs and priorities at the federal level, working with AMWA and other national associations and coordinating with them. We do that on a daily basis to make sure that we are understanding the broader water issues nationwide, and we're in sync with their priorities as you all advocate for your issues at the federal level, building relationships, and obviously positioning your projects for the best chance for success. So just you see the three pictures on the left there. I'm at the top left. I was a legislative director for a congressman from Washington State. We have Paige Strickler, who lives in Portland, used to be Senator Murray's Southwest Washington field director. And then Tara was worked for Senator Merkley and also in the Environment and Public Works Committee, which is the most important committee when it comes to water on the Senate side. And she'll be presenting here shortly. You'll hear from her. Next slide, please. When it comes to funding successes, we've had a very good run over the last few years in securing a $50 million WRDA authorization that Congresswoman Bonamici and Salinas helped secure in the bill. The authorization is really important to help secure additional federal funding for many of the projects that you're working on. This is a program that allows you to seek capital funding for your water infrastructure projects and gives you kind of a leg up in competing for federal funding. And that's one of the pots of money that you will be seeking funding for in 2026. You have a $50 million authorization, and we want to turn that into federal funding. $50 million is a lot of money through the authorization process. And the hope is what the federal appropriations process does is provide smaller chunks of money over time to actually deliver some of those funds. So we're looking at $2 to $5 million chunks over the next few years to deliver on that authorization to bring back to TVWD. And Tara will talk a little bit more about that in a future slide in terms of the projects that you're going to be putting forward in 2026. We were also able to help work with you all to secure a $3 million earmark from Congresswoman Bonamici in FY24 for the WWSS project, and also the same thing in 2022. And we'll also work together on a FEMA hazard mitigation project for $14.2 million. That's a grant project that will help you all with the Taylor's Ferry Reservoir project. And Tara's going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we faced with the current administration on that, and hopefully freeing up the rest of that money to make sure that project moves forward. Next slide, please. So Tara's going to talk a little bit about the funding and our policy successes that we've seen. So I know that Waylon mentioned a bit about some of the challenges that are happening at the state level. And at the federal level, funding is always a concern, but there's been some really good and positive developments on the funding front for FY26, the current federal year. And Tara's going to talk a little bit about that and how you all will be able to benefit from some of the federal funding decisions that have been made recently.
Hello. Hi, all. I'm Tara. I apologize that you can't see me and I'm not there in person to meet you. Joel shared a little bit about my background, but I've been with CFM for about a year now and working on TVWD's issues for the entirety of that. Before this, I was with the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, who has jurisdiction over water infrastructure programs in the U.S., and where I worked on the 2024 WRDA reauthorization bill. So maybe I'll take some credit for the $50 million authorization for TVWD from 2024. But to begin with, for this slide, we wanted to share some of the funding levels for the drinking water and clean water state revolving funds. In early 2025, CFM sent a letter to the Oregon delegation on behalf of TVWD asking for full funding in 2026 appropriations, which means basically keeping these levels at the funding level from FY25 rather than making cuts to the programs for both state revolving funds. We are happy to report that despite many delays in the appropriations process and the largest full government shutdown in history, the final FY26 Interior Environment Appropriations Bill was passed last week, and EPA's core water infrastructure programs were maintained at FY25 funding levels, including $1.26 billion for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, $1.639 billion for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and $64.6 million for the WIFIA loan program, and lastly, $2.25 million for the mid-size and large drinking water systems infrastructure resilience and sustainability program, which is a grant program that we hope to take advantage of in the future. When it comes to LIWAP, or the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program Establishment Act, we have been working this year to try to get LIWAP reinstated. There is a bill currently, which is the bill that you see on the PowerPoint. It's been reintroduced in the House. This bill would reinstate the program at Health and Human Services. We have worked on behalf of TVWD to get Congresswoman Salinas and Congresswoman Bonamici to co-sponsor this legislation. Currently, there is no Senate version of this bill, but we are staying engaged with the Oregon senators to hopefully get a Senate version introduced as well and eventually see this bill become law. Of course, it would have to pass both the House and Senate to go to the president's desk. One of the largest issues that TVWD is tracking and that we're working on their behalf is PFAS and, of course, PFAS liability protection. There's a two-part update here. The first one is that there is one piece of legislation that we are actively pushing for in the House. It's the Water Systems PFAS Liability Protection Act. This bill would preserve the polluter pays principle under CERCLA. It has been reintroduced in the House, but it has not yet been reintroduced in the Senate. However, the prime sponsor from the 118th Congress in the Senate was Senator Capito, who now chairs the relevant committee, the Environment and Public Works Committee. This bill is really the chief bill that people are looking towards for PFAS liability reform. So this is going to continue being a big part of the conversation, and this is going to be continuing to be a big lift on our behalf. There is movement in the courts as well. There was movement in 2025 at least. We saw a coalition of water utility associations and chemical companies, including AMWA, that previously sued to overturn the 2024 PFAS rule from the Biden administration. They argued that EPA did not follow proper safe drinking water procedures. In September 2025, EPA agreed with parts of the lawsuit, and EPA filed a motion asking the federal court to vacate enforceable drinking water limits for 4 of the PFAS chemicals. If granted, these chemicals would no longer have national regulatory limits under the 2024 PFAS rule. Separately, EPA announced plans to extend the compliance deadline for PFOA and PFOS, the two most common PFAS, by 2 years, from 2029 to 2031. This extension is expected to be formalized by spring 2026 and gives water systems additional time to meet PFOA/PFOS standards. At this point, regulatory outlook remains fluid, but we expect to see more concrete movement from both Congress and the administration in 2026, as well as further court actions. And the last thing that we'll talk about here is that $14.2 million hazard mitigation grant from FEMA that CFM helped TVWD to receive in 2023. TVWD and many entities have unfortunately been experiencing a delay in a disbursements of funds from FEMA due to pending approvals at the FEMA headquarters. CFM has alerted TVWD's congressional delegation to this issue, and we are actively working with your representatives to hopefully get those funds dispersed and the agreements signed. And we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Then here we're going to talk about your draft 2026 agenda, which of course, as Joel said, is just a draft, and we're happy to make any changes. To begin with, we'll talk about our congressional funding requests. We will continue to go after the Cornelius Pass pipeline project. This is a critical component of the broader Willamette Water Supply Systems project, and funds will go toward finalizing the design of the Cornelius Pass pipeline. We will be seeking a congressionally directed spending request for this project. The next project is a new project, new to us, at least in our requesting efforts at the federal level, but the next project is the Rosander Pump Station and Reservoir project. This project will replace the aging Sunset Pump Station with a new Rosander Pump Station and construct a second reservoir, Rosander 2, to improve water service reliability and resilience in the 575 and 820 pressure zones. This will also be a congressionally directed spending request. Lastly, there are other projects in the works right now with the Willamette Water Supply Coalition that we intend on going after that $50 million WRDA authorization for, but we need to finalize what projects we'll be going after. In terms of policy items, as discussed, PFAS is going to remain at the top of this list for monitoring and advocacy efforts in 2026. The fair outcome of the Willamette River allocation is something we're continuing to work on as well. We have sent a letter from coalition members supporting a fair outcome of the Willamette River allocation to the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation, but we are still awaiting a response from them. While we await a response, we're going to continue applying pressure to Congress and the administration. We are also monitoring the mid-size and large drinking water resilience and sustainability program. We are happy to see that funding levels remained from FY25 for this program, but the program is still heavily oversubscribed, so we're advocating for an increase in funding. And we want to stay engaged on this issue because this is going to be an important grant opportunity for TVWD in the future. For the SRFs, this will also remain on the agenda because even though we are happy with the win that we got in at the FY26 appropriations, FY27 appropriations are not that far away, sadly. So we want to continue monitoring funding levels there and ensure that funding levels maintain the same. For LIWOP, we are continuing to try and restore LIWOP funding and advocating for the legislation that has been introduced in the House and hopefully get the Senate companion bill introduced as well. Thank you. I will pass it back to Joel, but happy to answer any questions later on.
Thanks, Tara. Now, next slide, please, Paul. So this is our last slide before we open it up to any questions that you may have. And just to give you some sense of what's happening and what people are thinking about in Washington, D.C., we're in an election year. This is the midterms. And most Republicans and Democrats are thinking about their control of power and what 2026 is going to mean for them. So we obviously today have a full control, Republican control of the House and the Senate. In the Senate, we have a 53-47 majority. And the current map is a little bit challenging, and this is what senators are thinking about, challenging for Democrats to try to take back the Senate. They need to pick up 4 seats to take back the majority. And it's going to be a challenge. It's an uphill battle. And as many people learned in 5th grade, not all 100 seats are up every year, every 2 years. They split it up to 34 or 33 seats, depending in terms of the elections that are up, because they split it up over a 6-year term. And so in 2026, these seats that you see, the blue and the red, are the seats that are up in 2026. And Democrats, like I mentioned, need to pick up 4 seats to be in the majority. As of today, so the red is kind of the Republican leaning areas. The blue is the Democratic leaning areas. The brownish color is the open seats that are more competitive. If you look at that, Democrats need to pick up, like I mentioned, 4 seats. The most clear for them, they have 2 clear seats that they're looking to pick up. That's in Maine with Susan Collins. That's in Gray. And North Carolina is another seat that Democrats are looking to pick up. Tom Tillis from North Carolina is retiring, and it's an open seat there, and it's very competitive with the governor looking to run for Senate. So that's 2 seats the Democrats are looking that they could potentially pick up in 2026. But after those 2 seats, it looks really hard for Democrats to pick up more than that. Georgia, they're actually trying to defend those seats. Michigan, Democrats are defending that seat. So if they try to maintain, they need to keep those 2 seats. But then you're starting to look at states like Iowa and Texas and Alaska and Florida are some of the seats that Democrats think that they may have an opportunity to pick up, but those are that's very difficult terrain for Democrats to pick up unless there's a significant blue wave in 2026. So Republicans are feeling pretty good about their chances of maintaining their majority in the Senate. But time will tell. We're still 11 months away from the election, so we'll see how this map changes over time. I should mention Ohio as well. Ohio is a possible pickup for Democrats, with Sherrod Brown, the former senator from Ohio, looking to retake his seat there. But it's going to be a pretty hard slog for Democrats to pick up the majority in the Senate. On the House side, Democrats are feeling a lot better there. Right now, there's a 2 or 3 seat majority, depending on which day of the week you're looking at. Marjorie Taylor Greene recently retired. There was a death in California from Congressman LaMalfa. So Republican majorities have been shrinking over time, and there's very little wiggle room and margin for error when it comes to that 218 seat majority that Republicans need to maintain going into 2026. Obviously, there's been some redistricting efforts in Texas, in California, in Virginia, Illinois, and other states. But Democrats generally feel like there's some good headwinds on their side with recent governor's races in New Jersey, in Virginia, and some special elections in 2025. Democrats are overperforming and feeling really good about their chances of picking up the House of Representatives in 2026. So you're going to start seeing, I believe, some more retirements on the Republican side as they think they may not be in the majority. Being in the minority in the House of Representatives is not fun. And we've already seen some retirements on the Republican side, and we anticipate that might continue over the next couple of weeks. But once we get into primary season, which starts as early as February of this year, it's going to be very interesting to see the polling and the dynamics of the House races across the country as they're running into some headwinds when it comes to affordability, when it comes to some of Trump's more controversial policies, whether the independents and Democrats have the motivation to come out to vote in 2026. So we're keeping a close eye on that. The only reason I'm mentioning this is because this is what everybody in Washington, D.C. is thinking about and talking about the midterm elections. Typically, when you have full control for one party and the presidency, the midterm elections are bad for the controlling party, and Democrats are hopeful that they'll be able to turn the tide and bring back some power to their party in the midterm elections. And that is going to have significant impacts on how Congress works, how the administration works, and Congress and the nation moving forward. So just wanted to highlight that to give you some perspective, but happy to take questions on your water issues, your water projects, or the national state of play in Washington, D.C.
Are there any questions? Mr. Sanders?
I think you're on mute, Tom.
Yeah. I know everybody in the office can't see, but I can see our team for DC here in front of me. And I can confirm, A, they're dressed professionally at 10 o'clock at night. And Joel's so committed, he's pounding a Starbucks Grande. So you know they're working hard on our behalf, and we appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I'm actually in the office.
You're actually
So,
in the office.
yeah,
Wow.
this is my office. Yeah.
10 o'clock
I
at
appreciate
night.
that, Tom.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I just had, this is Commissioner Fisher. I just had one question. You mentioned we were having struggles getting our members of Congress to sign in on to the latest bill for the low-income water assistance program. Have have their offices expressed to you what their reservations are, or is it just hasn't been able to come up yet?
Hi, I can answer that question. We've actually had a success with Congresswomen's both Bonamici and Salinas to sign on to that bill for LIWOP. Unfortunately, there is just no Senate version of the bill currently. So we're working with the senators to see if they want to introduce the bill. They don't have reservations on the topic of the bill. They think LIWOP is good and they do want to see that happen. I'm assuming that there are some more internal political issues going on when it comes to introducing the bill in the minority and making sure that they're going to have that bipartisan support from Republican senators so it can actually see movement. At this point, with having the minority in both the House and the Senate, Democrat senators are really trying to not introduce bills unless they can get a bipartisan co-sponsor, because if they introduce it without one, it will very likely not move anywhere.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Duggan. I am curious as to what your thoughts might be regarding the potential for another government shutdown later this winter, early spring.
Yeah, that's a great question. A few months ago, so as Tara mentioned, we just went through the longest government shutdown in American history. It was 43 days, and I think both Democrats and Republicans got exhausted by that. And the current appropriations process over the last month has been really reassuring for me to see that Democrats and Republicans have been working together to try to get these bills done. The current deadline is January 30th. And as Tara mentioned, some of the bills have already passed. So the interior bill, which includes a lot of the funding for your system, EPA, passed already. and is going to be signed by the president. And there's about 5 remaining. So there's 12 appropriations bills total. There's about 5 appropriations bills left. And Congress is working really, actually, surprisingly well to get those bills done by January 30th. The House is expected to finalize those bills this week. The Senate comes back next week. They're expected to pass those bills. And there is no indication that there would be another government shutdown. The only caveat I have right now is the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill is causing a bit of consternation among Democrats. Seeing the ICE activity in Minneapolis and in Portland and across the country, there's a lot of Democrats that are concerned about ICE and their tactics, and Democrats may not vote to support the appropriations bill, but at the same time, they all know that ICE was funded in the One Big Beautiful Bill, the HR1, as Waylon referred to before. They already have their funding, so even if they don't approve the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, ICE has the funding to move forward. So Democrats are weighing the calculus over trying to say that what ICE is doing is wrong and maybe not vote for the Homeland Security bill, but also knowing that what if they vote against it and try to shut down Homeland Security, it won't have any impact over the actual operations of ICE. So if you're watching the news, you'll see that debate happen over the next couple of days. But at the end of the day, I do anticipate that bill passing as well, with limited Democrat support in the House, but with bipartisan support in the Senate, losing some detractors on the Senate Democrat side. But that's the only controversial bill that's kind of outstanding there of the 12 appropriations bills that are remaining. But I do anticipate that all of those appropriations bills will be passed by January 30th, which is the deadline for government funding. And so I do not anticipate a government shutdown at this point in time. With that said, there's all kinds of variables out there with the Trump administration and some conservative Republicans that could slow down the process. But I do anticipate that these bills will pass and there will not be a government shutdown on February 1st. So we'll be getting through the FY26 process. Government will be funded, and then they're going to move quickly to the FY27 budget process and start working on those bills in the February, March timeframe, where the appropriations process will start over again. And as Tara mentioned, a lot of your projects that we'll be submitting will be part of that. And so there'll be an opportunity for additional congressionally directed spending and other funding opportunities for you all moving forward. So that's a long answer to your question, but I don't expect a government shutdown. If there is, it might be limited to the Homeland Security Department, and that would be separate from the rest of the government.
Thank you. Good to hear.
I am not hearing any more questions, so thank you, team.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 426? Oh, okay.
Well, given your enthusiasm, we'll go through this fairly quickly. Because frankly, this is all information that we've presented to you before. And in fact, I'll just skip to the strategies themselves. First, starting the federal strategy, I did want to mention a little bit based on the last presentation about our ask on the PFAS. There are really 3 aspects to the PFAS issue that are important to TVWD. One is the pushback that our industry associations are doing on what the EPA did on setting limits. There's some issues there with the science. We don't need to get into it, but that is one thing. Are we able to measure that and tie it back to health impacts? Probably not as important to TVWD right now, but the way that the Safe Drinking Water Act works, we need to keep an eye on that. The other two are a little bit more important. One is to keep PFAS out of the Willamette River. So that's something that we will advocate for, anything that can reduce the impact of PFAS in the river. And then the second one is the liability reform. So right now, if we withdraw PFAS in the water, we didn't put it there, the polluter did. We treat the water, that PFAS is going to be in our residuals that we have. We don't want that liability to transfer to us simply because we removed it from the environment. So those are the three aspects on the PFAS. Otherwise, the federal legislative strategy is what you saw last time. And again, we will continue to focus on funding, but we're also wanting to engage with the delegation to make sure that should things turn around, we are a familiar organization and we can be there to meet those needs. On the state level, the same thing. We are looking at the policy side, as Waylon talked about, a very short agenda. The only change to legislative strategy that you see here from the one that you saw last year is I updated it to be consistent with our new mission statement that the board adopted. So there's language changes there merely to bring that into alignment with the board adopted mission statement for the Tualatin Valley Water District. And with that, our recommendation then is the adoption of Resolution 0426. With that, I'll turn it back to you unless there are any questions for me.
See any questions? So do I have a motion and a second?
This is Commissioner Lysick, so moved.
This is Jim Dove, second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 426. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Now we'll welcome up Justin Carlton.
Thank you, President Fisher. Good evening, Commissioners. I will also attempt to be brief in my presentation. So tonight we're asking the board to take action on adopting the investment policy, and we thought we'd take the opportunity to also provide some updates on the district's financial performance and the review of the financial forecast in the context of how those things are supported by our management of our financial portfolio. I say policy update, but update's a bit of a misnomer because the policy that we're bringing forward is actually identical to the current policy. So there were no updates for 2026. But the board is required to adopt a policy because under ORS 294, this allows the district to invest in securities with maturities exceeding 18 months. And so this policy has been developed by the district's professional investment firm that assists us with the process. It aligns with the Oregon short-term funds investment strategies. It helps us in terms of developing objectives for our investments for the portfolio, gives us the authorization to go ahead and execute those transactions, and establishes the requirements for the level of diversification that we hold in the financial portfolio. There's three guiding principles that we use in terms of the investment objectives, and that's preservation of invested capital. So what we're looking to accomplish there is mitigating the impacts of inflation over time so that we're not just stuffing the money under a mattress, although I do use that analogy from time to time, but actually making sure that we're getting some appreciation of the capital that we're managing for our rate or for our customers. And then obviously liquidity is a very important aspect as we're undergoing a pretty intensive capital cycle. We need to make sure that we have the money to pay the bills as they come due, as well as our normal operation liquidity needs. And then finally, getting some return on the investment as well. So with the funds that are entrusted to us, we want to make sure that we're able to provide a reasonable market return that's appropriate for the level of risks that we're taking on with those financial instruments. So we do obviously need to balance the amount of risk we're able to accept with that return. Some of the things that we do, so we focus on managing our interest rate risk. So the investments that we invest in are typically high credit rating investments. So things like treasuries or agency securities. We do have some corporate securities, but we tend to focus on things that are really on the shorter end of the investment cycle or the investment curve and have low risk. So as I mentioned, we do stay shorter into the market. That's partly because of our liquidity needs, but also because of kind of where the market has been. And then we typically will hold our securities to maturity. So this gives us some assurances to what the return on those securities will be. We're not looking to time the market. We're not looking to be actively engaged in terms of trying to sell securities for a profit. We'll choose something based on its duration, based on its potential return, and then we'll buy it and hold it until it fully matures. And then finally, focusing our portfolio against other benchmarks helps us avoid trying to do those market timings and really just focusing on making sure that our liquidity needs are met and that our portfolio matches the needs of the financial strategy of the district. So I apologize for the font size of these graphs, but I want to just talk a little bit about kind of the maturity period. And you've heard me mention in the past, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And that's been kind of the environment that we've been in the last couple of years. So what we're looking at here is the Treasury yield curve 2 years ago. So back in January of 2024. And really wanting to focus more on the shape of the curve as opposed to the numbers themselves. What we've got on the vertical y-axis that's the percentage rate of return. And then across the horizontal x-axis, that's the duration and time going from the first bullet point there would be the 1 month period and then going all the way out to 30 years. So this is an inverted yield curve, and that was the environment we were in at the time when we were just about concluding the amount of our WIFIA draws, so the $387 million that we were pulling from the WIFIA loan. We had completed the issuance of our 2023 bonds, and we were also getting ready to issue our 2024 bonds. So we had a pretty considerable amount of capital as we were seeing some delays in the construction costs associated with the Willamette. So we had a substantial portfolio that we were able to invest in this environment, where on the short end of the curve, we were able to keep recycling those funds through those short-term investments and be able to leverage some of those returns, at the 5% number and above. Fast forward to the environment that we're in today, quite different. We describe this more as a more normal yield curve, but I do want to focus more on kind of the flattening of the curve is what we see. So those investments between the 1 month and 2 year cycle really don't have a lot of variability in terms of the return. So we're still able to focus our investment strategy on maintaining that liquidity to pay for the Willamette while still generating a reasonable return as compared to the risk that we're able to accept, or the interest rate risk that we're able to accept within the market. So very, very different environments, but we're still able to benefit from both situations. Looking at the district's portfolio as compared to some benchmarks, so the solid line that's shaded in blue, those are the district monthly yields. They look like they vary quite a bit. That's really more as a result of the tracking software that we use and how it records our coupon payments. So as those coupon payments come in, they show as revenues. They're not spread out based on an accrual basis. And then comparing that to the middle sort of gold line, which is dotted, that would be the local government investment pool benchmark. And then finally, the more solid line above that would be the 1 year Treasury benchmark. So you can see sort of how we've performed over the last 4 years compared to those benchmarks as the market interest rates started to increase pretty substantially in the early part of the 2020s. We saw our returns go up, and so ours tend to lag the market a little bit because of the fact that we do hold our maturities to security. We're not out there buying and selling. We're making a strategy and we're sticking to it. And then as things have sort of culminated closer together, so we're actually seeing now as the LGIPs longer duration investments start to fall out of their portfolio, their rates have gone down. So we've seen multiple month decreases. Actually, they just announced another decrease effective. So we're now down to 4.1% return in the local government investment pool. And we're seeing the district's portfolio start to have a kind of a downward trend also, but we're still above that 1 year Treasury benchmark. I think those things will start to consolidate tighter in the next several months. As our total cash position is started to decrease as we do continue to fund our investments in the Willamette. Our current portfolio as of December 31st was about $280 million, down from about $300 earlier in the biennium. We still have a substantial investment ahead of us in terms of our capital program. in the current biennium as well as in the out years. Looking at the forecast for the capital, so we still have about $390 million worth of capital investments that are projected for the 10-year horizon. We can see that large peak, the blue there, that's our investment in the Willamette Water Supply Program. That peak is actually starting to flatten out a little bit. So we are heading on the downward side, but it is pushing out in time a little more as we experience some of the delays associated with the treatment plant project. And so we are seeing that occur, but for the remainder of the biennium, we still have an anticipated $160 million of capital outlay, and then some other projects out in the future. And as I mentioned, about $890 million for the 10-year total, the majority of which is associated with the WWSS. And then we've got some significant in-district projects as well as some capital investments associated with our investment in the Joint Water Commission. So looking at the biennial numbers, one thing I do want to point out is that this is based on the budget for the total budget for all funds. So the district's portion for the biennium is about 163 million remaining, whereas the total budget here is about 280 million or 432 million total for the budget of the biennium. We don't spread our capital expenditures based on any other algorithm. It's just a linear spread for the first year and then a second year spread. So that's why there's a very linear slope to these lines here. But you can see that we've been performing at a level below what we anticipated pretty consistently through the biennium to date for the first 6 months here. On the revenue side associated with capital, our system development charge revenue has begun to slip off of budget. So we started off the early part of the biennium sort of on track. These are pretty volatile in terms of receipts, and they tend to kind of align with construction seasons, but we have been seeing a trend in the last few months of below budget and what we anticipated in terms of system development charge revenue. On the plus side, on the operating expenditures, we've been seeing a pretty consistent trend of being below budget on our operating expenditures. And then on the revenue side of that, we have experienced water sales that have been pretty much in line with projections biennium to date. With that, we are proposing that the board adopt resolution 526 to help comply with ORS 294. And that resolution would be adopting the investment policy for the Tualatin Valley Water District, and there were no changes to the policy as currently adopted. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Online? Okay, so there's no questions. Thank you, Justin. We have a motion. We have a motion and a second.
This is Commissioner Lysick, so moved.
This is Jim Doan, second.
We have a motion to adopt resolution 526 and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. With that, I will now close the regular session of the board. We'll convene an executive session. Will the state recorder please read the executive session script?
Certainly, an executive session of the board is called under ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed.